Your Majesty, the test is positive. The words did not echo in the chamber, yet they seemed to bend the air around them. Queen Valara Nyx stood motionless beneath the vaulted ceiling of the royal biogenesis wing, her 8-foot frame outlined in silver blue light from the diagnostic panels. Outside the crystalline walls, the twin moons of Salari Prime drifted across a black sky, their glow refracting through the city's spires like cold fire. Inside, the only sound was the steady hum of containment fields calibrated to 1/10 of a degree, a precaution reserved for matters of the crown. The chief geneticist lowered her four-fingered hands, golden eyes fixed on the floating display that pulsed with a single line of confirmation. Royal conception verified. It had been 72 hours since the human crash-landed in restricted airspace. 72 hours since Queen Valara had laughed, openly, unapologetically, at the absurd suggestion whispered by her advisors that human biology was unpredictable. A primitive species with delusions of relevance, she had said then, her voice smooth as polished metal. She remembered the exact temperature of the council chamber that day, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, precisely regulated, and the way the human male had stood in restraints without lowering his gaze. Commander Ethan Cross, white-skinned, 6 feet 2 inches tall, eyes the color of a terrestrial ocean. His shuttle had fallen from the sky like a dying star, trailing ionized smoke across imperial territory no outsider was permitted to enter. By law, he should have been expelled immediately. By tradition, he should never have been brought within palace walls. And yet, a solar flare had crippled the outer defense grid that same afternoon, overloading atmospheric shields and sealing half the capital in lockdown. Ethan Cross had been in the wrong place at the worst possible time, or perhaps the only possible time. Valara closed her eyes now, recalling the moment the containment system failed in the isolation wing. Warning sirens had hissed through the corridors as pressure dropped by 3% per second. Human lungs were fragile under such conditions. Salari physiology could tolerate fluctuations, but not prolonged exposure. The technicians had frozen, awaiting royal command. It was the human who moved first. He had crossed the room without hesitation, disengaged a panel with bare hands despite the heat radiating at nearly 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and rerouted auxiliary power using a portable stabilizer from his own suit. He had not asked permission. He had not bowed. He had simply acted. The field recalibrated. Oxygen levels normalized. And in the chaos of failing systems and flickering lights, he had placed a steadying hand at the center of her chest, right above the biocore implant unique to the royal bloodline, activating his device to regulate her faltering rhythm when a feedback surge struck her nervous system. The contact had lasted less than 4 seconds. For seconds that no one fully understood. Valara opened her eyes again. Explain, she said quietly. The geneticist swallowed. The stabilizer emitted a frequency pattern compatible with dormant royal receptors. It appears to have initiated a bond sequence. Valara's jaw tightened. Royal receptors had not activated in over 3 centuries. The line was considered biologically stable but reproductively inert, a sacrifice made long ago to preserve control of succession. She had built her reign on that certainty. You are certain? She asked. The display pulsed once more, brighter this time. Yes, Your Majesty. Somewhere deep within her, beneath armor and ceremony and the weight of 17 star systems, something unfamiliar stirred, small, undeniable, alive. And for the first time since the human arrived, Queen Valara Nyx did not laugh. The palace corridors felt narrower than they had that morning, as if the very architecture had shifted in response to the data now locked behind encrypted glass. Queen Valara Nyx moved through the silver-blue passageways without escort, her measured steps echoing against floors polished to a mirror sheen. At precisely 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the air remained perfectly regulated, but she sensed heat beneath her skin that had nothing to do with climate control. Royal physiology did not fluctuate without cause. Every heartbeat of her kind was documented from birth to coronation. Nothing in those records prepared her for this. 72 hours earlier, Commander Ethan Cross had stood in a containment chamber 30 feet below the council wing, wrists encircled by magnetic restraints calibrated to human tolerance levels. He had not struggled. He had studied the room instead, cataloging exit points and structural seams with a soldier's instinct. When the flare surge rippled across the capital and emergency lighting flickered to amber, he had looked at the ceiling rather than at her, calculating. That detail unsettled her more now than his defiance had then. He had acted not to impress, not to provoke, but because the system required action. Veolyra paused before a wall of transparent alloy overlooking the lower city. Streams of transport craft traced luminous arcs between towers that pierced the clouds at nearly 3,000 feet. Her empire functioned on predictability, on order, on bloodlines carefully curated over centuries. She pressed her palm against the glass. The biocore implant beneath her sternum responded with a faint pulse, softer than a whisper, yet impossible to ignore. Inside the biogenesis wing, the chief geneticist waited beside a suspended holodisplay projecting layered strands of luminous code. The bond sequence is stable, the scientist said, voice carefully neutral. It is not an infection. It is not a malfunction. It is compatibility. Veolyra's golden eyes narrowed. That word does not exist in royal doctrine. It does now, Your Majesty. The human remained in isolation. Surveillance feeds showed him seated on the narrow platform provided for rest, hands folded loosely, gaze fixed on the ceiling where faint condensation traced geometric patterns from the environmental vents. He had been informed that diagnostic scans were ongoing. He had not demanded explanation. He had not requested counsel. At one point, he had asked for water measured in ounces rather than liters, correcting the attendant with a quiet, almost apologetic tone. Such a small detail, yet it revealed how deeply rooted his own world remained within him. Veolyra studied his image for a long moment. There was no triumph in his posture, no arrogance, only patience. Does he know? She asked. No, Your Majesty. We have not disclosed the findings. She considered the council's likely reaction. 17 star systems governed under her authority would interpret this as vulnerability. Rival factions would frame it as contamination. The narrative would spread faster than any shuttle could travel. A human male initiating a royal sequence thought extinct. She inhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. The memory returned with unsettling clarity. The containment alarms, the drop in atmospheric pressure, the sharp flicker of pain along her neural pathways. Ethan Cross stepping forward without waiting for permission, his hand pressing against her chest plate to align the stabilizer. The device emitting a low-frequency hum that resonated through her entire frame. For seconds, less than the time required to issue a formal decree. Prepare a private audience chamber, she said at last. Minimal security. No council oversight. The geneticist hesitated only a fraction of a second. You intend to speak with him directly? Veolyra turned from the window, silver blue light, reflecting across the planes of her face. I intend to understand precisely what has begun. Far below, in a chamber designed to contain threats, Commander Ethan Cross remained unaware that the balance of an empire had shifted the moment he chose to save a life instead of waiting for orders. The private audience chamber was smaller than the grand halls of state, yet it carried more weight than any throne room. Soft white light filtered through curved panels, illuminating a circular space exactly 40 feet in diameter. Temperature set at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Gravity stabilized to Earth standard to prevent unnecessary strain. Commander Ethan Cross stood at its center without restraints this time, his hands visible at his sides, posture straight but not rigid. When the doors parted with a muted hiss, he did not bow. He simply turned. Queen Veolyra Nyx entered alone. No council members. No guards lining the walls. Only the faint hum of environmental systems and the distant vibration of the capital below. For a moment, neither spoke. She observed him the way one studies a rare atmospheric anomaly, searching for instability. He looked tired but composed, light stubble shadowing his jaw, shoulders squared beneath a simple neutral garment provided by palace staff. Your Majesty, he said at last, voice steady, American accent unmistakable. I assume this is not about parking violations. The corner of her mouth almost shifted, but she restrained it. You are aware you trespassed into sovereign airspace. Yes, ma'am. My navigation system failed during the flare surge. I was trying to avoid crashing into your city. He held her gaze without challenge, without submission. Just clarity. Veolyra stepped closer, the polished floor reflecting her silver blue skin like liquid metal. 72 hours ago, during the containment failure, you initiated contact with my biocore implant. Ethan exhaled slowly. I initiated emergency stabilization. Your neural rhythm was destabilizing. If I misread the situation, that is on me. You touched the royal line without authorization. I kept you breathing. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. Is this about cultural protocol? Because if I violated something symbolic, I apologize. That was not my intent. Veilira studied his expression for deception and found none. Intent does not alter consequence. She extended her hand and activated a hovering display between them. Luminous strands spiraled in three-dimensional space, intersecting in patterns both elegant and impossible. Ethan's eyes tracked the data automatically. Training. Curiosity. Those are genetic sequences, he said quietly. Yes. Her voice remained controlled, though her pulse registered a subtle elevation. Royal sequences. Recently activated. He looked from the display back to her face, confusion sharpening his features. Activated how? Through compatibility with an external biological signature. Yours. The words settled in the chamber like a shift in gravity. Ethan did not step back. He did not step forward. He absorbed it. That is not possible, he said, not dismissive but analytical. We are different species. Different evolutionary trees. Our science once believed the same. Veilira deactivated the display with a flick of her fingers. You did not act with malice. You did not act with ambition. And yet, something has begun. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. Are you telling me that stabilizing your heart rhythm triggered reproduction? His voice did not rise. It lowered. Careful. Respectful. Our royal line has remained biologically dormant for 3 centuries, she replied. Until your intervention. He held her gaze, and in his eyes she saw not pride, not conquest, but responsibility. Your Majesty, he said softly. I did not come here to change your empire. Veilira felt the faint pulse beneath her sternum again, subtle but undeniable. That, she answered, stepping closer until only a few feet separated them, may no longer be within your control. The air between them felt denser now, though the environmental readout still held steady at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Commander Ethan Cross did not retreat when Queen Veilira stepped closer. He measured distance the way he measured risk, by breath and posture rather than by fear. If something has begun, he said carefully, then we need data. Real data, not assumptions built on ceremony. Her golden eyes sharpened at that. You speak to a sovereign as if she were a laboratory variable. I speak to someone whose life I tried to save, he replied, voice calm. If my intervention caused unintended biological consequences, I will not ignore that. The honesty in his tone unsettled her more than defiance ever could. Most beings in her presence calculated advantage. Ethan Cross calculated responsibility. Veilira turned slightly, activating a subtle field that ensured no external surveillance penetrated the chamber. A faint shimmer passed across the curved walls, isolating them from the rest of the palace. The council cannot know the full extent of this, she said. Not yet. Ethan nodded once. Because they would see it as weakness. They would see it as instability. She paused, the faint pulse beneath her sternum sinking momentarily with the steady rhythm displayed on the diagnostic band at her wrist. My line has remained reproductively dormant to preserve balance among 17 systems. No heir means no succession conflict. Ethan absorbed that. And now there might be one. The words were quiet, not triumphant. Simply factual. Veilira watched him closely. You do not appear pleased by the possibility of influencing imperial succession. He let out a breath that might have been the beginning of a laugh, though no sound followed. Your Majesty, I was trying to keep an oxygen system from collapsing. I was not auditioning for royalty. A silence followed, lighter this time, edged with something almost resembling mutual understanding. She deactivated the field and began walking toward the panoramic window that overlooked the capital. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, stopping 3 feet behind her. Below them, transport lanes shimmered in organized patterns, each vessel maintaining precise altitude and velocity. Order. Predictability. On Earth, she said without turning. Does your species consider reproduction a matter of duty or choice? Ethan took a moment before answering. Both. It depends on the individual. But it is never just politics. It is personal. The word lingered. Personal. Veolara had ruled for 12 standard years. Every decision she made was calculated against trade routes, resource allocation, interstellar treaties. There had been no room for personal variables. And yet now, her body responded to a sequence activated by a human male who had acted without seeking permission. If the Council discovers this prematurely, she continued, they may attempt to remove the variable. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Meaning me. She did not deny it. I will not permit instability, she said. But I will not allow ignorance to dictate action either. He stepped closer, closing the distance to 2 feet, still careful not to intrude. Then we gather evidence. Quietly. You run your tests. I cooperate. We figure out what this is before anyone turns it into a weapon. Weapon. The word felt foreign in this context, yet accurate. Information could destabilize more effectively than force. Veolara turned to face him fully. Up close, she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, marks of experience rather than age. He was not a conqueror. He was not a schemer. He was simply human. You would remain here, she asked. Under my authority? Until we understand what is happening, he answered. Yes. The pulse beneath her sternum answered before she did, a subtle echo against her ribcage. For the first time since the confirmation, Veolara did not feel only disruption. She felt alignment. Not of empire, not of doctrine, but of intention. Very well, Commander Cross, she said quietly. You will remain under royal protection. And somewhere beyond the chamber walls, the future shifted again, not with thunder, but with the steady rhythm of 2 lives moving into uncertain synchronization. Royal protection changed everything and nothing at the same time. Commander Ethan Cross was relocated from the isolation wing to a secured guest suite 3 levels below the central council chamber, a space designed for foreign dignitaries rather than detainees. The room measured nearly 1,000 square feet, with curved walls of pale alloy and a panoramic viewport that revealed the capital's vertical skyline stretching more than 2,000 feet into layered clouds. The temperature remained steady at 71 degrees Fahrenheit, gravity calibrated to Earth standard. It was comfortable. It was controlled. It was not freedom. Ethan stood near the viewport, hands resting lightly behind his back as he watched streams of air traffic move in synchronized arcs. Every ship maintained exact spacing, exact velocity, exact altitude. Nothing collided. Nothing hesitated. The Empire ran on precision. A soft chime announced the doors opening. Queen Veolara Nyx entered without escort once more, silver blue skin reflecting ambient light in subtle gradients. She wore no ceremonial armor tonight, only a streamlined garment woven with faint conductive threads that responded to her biocore's pulse. It was practical, unadorned, almost personal. Your accommodations meet human standards? She asked. Ethan glanced around. I have slept in worse places. I have slept in better ones. This will do. She studied him for signs of resentment. There were none. Only alertness. Preliminary tests confirm continued activation, she said. The sequence is stabilizing rather than dissipating. Ethan absorbed that quietly, meaning this is not temporary, meaning it is progressing. She stepped closer to the center of the room where a hovering diagnostic field projected faint readings in the air between them. The pulse beneath her sternum responded again, slightly. Stronger now, measurable on external sensors. On Earth, she asked, voice lower. How does your species respond to unexpected responsibility? Ethan allowed himself a small, thoughtful breath. Some people run. Some people panic. Some people step up because there is no alternative. And you? He met her gaze directly. I do not walk away from consequences I helped create. Even accidental ones. The words settled with more weight than either expected. Outside the viewport, a transport vessel adjusted course by 3 degrees to avoid intersecting lanes. Precise. Controlled. Predictable. Inside the room, nothing felt predictable anymore. Veolara folded her hands loosely before her, posture still regal but less rigid than before. The Council has begun requesting updates regarding your status, she said. They are aware that you remain within palace walls. Ethan gave a slight nod. They will assume I am leverage. They will assume you are risk. She paused. They will not assume you are necessary. A faint tightening crossed his expression at that word. Necessary. He had been many things in his life. Soldier. Pilot. Survivor. Necessary had always been tied to crisis. He glanced toward the faint glow at her chest, subtle but unmistakable. Then we make sure they understand the data before they understand the narrative, he said. You control information flow. I provide transparency. Veilira tilted her head slightly, studying him as if recalibrating her assessment. Transparency is not traditionally valued in imperial politics. It is valued in survival, he replied. And right now, survival includes you. The pulse between them seemed to synchronize again, subtle yet present. Veilira felt it with growing clarity, not as weakness, but as connection to something beyond doctrine. There will be resistance, she said quietly. From within. Ethan's posture remained steady. Then we face it with facts. For the first time since the confirmation, Veilira allowed the faintest hint of vulnerability to surface in her voice. You understand that your continued presence alters the balance of power across 17 systems. Ethan did not look away. Your Majesty, I understand that a life may be forming because I chose to act instead of waiting. That matters more to me than politics. Silence filled the suite, not cold but charged with shared awareness. Outside, the Empire continued its flawless rotation through the night. Inside, two beings from different worlds stood 3 feet apart, bound not by ceremony, not by conquest, but by consequence neither had intended and neither was willing to deny. The first tremor did not register on external sensors. It registered within her. Queen Veilira Nyx paused mid-stride in the central strategy corridor, one hand lightly touching the cool alloy wall as a subtle wave of dizziness passed through her equilibrium. The environmental display above the archway read 71 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity precisely controlled, atmospheric composition optimal for her species. Nothing in the palace systems had shifted. Yet her internal metrics told a different story. 3 days had passed since the confirmation. The royal biocore now emitted a steady harmonic frequency measurable at a fraction above baseline. Not unstable, not dangerous, but undeniably active. Across the capital, advisory councils convened under the pretense of trade realignment and defense grid recalibration. In truth, rumors had begun circulating. A human male still residing within palace walls was not a trivial detail. Commander Ethan Cross felt the shift before it reached him officially. The guest suite lighting adjusted to evening mode as he finished reviewing cross-referenced genetic models projected above the central table. He was not a biologist by training, but years of field operations had taught him how to analyze patterns quickly. The data displayed interlocking strands that should not have aligned. Yet they did. A soft alert chimed at the doorway. This time, when it opened, Veilira was not alone. 2 senior counselors stood several feet behind her, tall figures in formal metallic robes, their expressions controlled to the point of stillness. Ethan straightened instinctively. Your Majesty, he said evenly. Veilira's posture was regal, but the faint strain beneath it did not escape him. The Council has requested observational access, she stated. They will remain silent. One counselor's eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan, measuring him not as a person, but as a variable. Commander Cross, the counselor said, voice smooth and precise. Your continued presence has strategic implications. Ethan nodded once. I understand that. You claim no intent to influence succession? The second counselor asked. I claim I acted to prevent system failure. Ethan replied calmly. Everything beyond that was unintended. The counselors exchanged a glance, subtle but meaningful. Veilira stepped forward, placing herself slightly between Ethan and the officials, a movement so small it could be dismissed as coincidence. It was not. Preliminary progression remains stable, she said. There is no evidence of biological threat. The word threat lingered. The first counselor inclined his head. Stability does not eliminate political consequence. Ethan could feel the tension in the room tightening like a cable pulled too far. He resisted the urge to step forward defensively. Instead, he kept his hands visible at his sides. Then let the data lead, he said. If this activation strengthens your line, that is not instability. That is evolution. The counselors did not respond immediately. Outside the viewport, transport lanes shimmered under the planet's second moon, steady and organized. Inside, the silence stretched. Veilira felt another pulse beneath her sternum, slightly stronger now, synchronized with her measured breathing. She did not look at Ethan, but she sensed his steady presence 3 feet to her right. Not pushing, not retreating. The second counselor finally spoke. Further evaluation will continue under council supervision. Veilira's voice remained even. Under royal authority. The distinction was subtle. The message was not. The officials bowed minimally and withdrew, their robes whispering across the polished floor. When the doors sealed shut, the air seemed to expand again. Ethan exhaled slowly. That went better than I expected, he said quietly. Veilira allowed herself a small, controlled breath. It has only begun. She turned toward him, silver blue skin reflecting the ambient light. Resistance will increase. Ethan met her gaze without hesitation. So will clarity. The pulse between them continued, steady and unbroken, no longer a shock but a rhythm. Beyond the palace walls, 17-star systems rotated in silent alignment. Within one guarded suite, a new alignment held its ground. The formal summons arrived at exactly 0600 Palace Standard Time, transmitted across every secured channel within the royal residence. An emergency convocation of the High Council had been declared, attendance mandatory, subject classified. Commander Ethan Cross read the notification on the suite's central display, while the first light of Salari Prime filtered through the panoramic viewport in pale silver bands. Outside, air traffic patterns shifted subtly, security corridors tightening by half a mile in radius around the palace core. Inside, the temperature held steady at 71 degrees Fahrenheit, but tension registered far above baseline. The doors opened without a chime this time. Queen Veilira Nyx entered in full ceremonial regalia, silver blue armor layered with thin bands of luminous gold that traced the outline of her frame. The garment was not designed for combat. It was designed for authority. The faint harmonic pulse beneath her sternum was now strong enough to register on handheld scanners without amplification. Ethan rose immediately. I am guessing this is not a routine briefing, he said quietly. Veilira met his gaze, and for the first time since his arrival, there was no distance in her expression, only resolve. The council has completed independent verification, she said. They will announce their findings publicly within the hour. Ethan absorbed the weight of that. And the findings? She held his eyes as if anchoring herself in the moment. The activation is confirmed. There is sustained development within the royal line. The words did not echo, yet they reshaped the air between them. Beyond the suite walls, distant corridors filled with the low vibration of assembling officials. The High Council chamber, a circular hall 200 feet in diameter, was already broadcasting encrypted signals to allied systems. 17-star systems would soon receive a transmission that altered centuries of precedent. What happens in that room? Ethan asked. Veilira stepped closer, lowering her voice though no one else was present. There will be proposals. Some will argue for containment. Some will argue for your removal from imperial territory. Others will argue for formal recognition. She paused, the faint glow beneath her chest brightening almost imperceptibly. I will argue for legitimacy. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Legitimacy for you, he said carefully. Or for us? The question lingered without accusation. Only clarity. Veilira inhaled slowly, steadying the rhythm within her. For what has begun, she answered. A distant resonance rolled through the palace structure as the council chamber sealed its outer gates. The session had begun. Ethan moved to stand beside her rather than behind her, not as an equal in rank, but as a participant in consequence. If they frame this as weakness, he said, voice steady, they are wrong. Strength is adapting when the unexpected proves viable. Veilira studied him for a heartbeat longer. You understand that stepping into that chamber with me places you at the center of imperial history. Ethan gave the faintest nod. I stepped into a failing containment unit 3 days ago. This feels like the same principle. For the briefest moment, something softer passed across her features, not a smile, but recognition. She extended her hand, not as command, but as invitation. Ethan looked at it, then at her, and placed his hand against hers in a gesture neither fully ceremonial nor fully personal. The contact was steady, intentional. The harmonic pulse responded instantly, measured now at a level impossible to dismiss. Outside the suite, palace corridors filled with watchful eyes. Inside, 2 figures stood aligned not by tradition, not by strategy, but by choice. and beyond the sealed doors of the High Council chamber, the future of 17 systems waited for them to enter. The High Council chamber rose in concentric tiers beneath a domed ceiling that projected a live star map of 17 systems in slow, deliberate rotation. Each luminous point pulsed with synchronized precision, trade routes traced in faint lines of gold between them. The temperature inside the hall held at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than the private suites, designed to sharpen focus and reduce emotional variance. At the chamber's center stood a circular platform 30 feet across, illuminated from below by a steady white glow. Queen Valira Nyx entered first, her silver-blue armor catching the light like polished glass. Commander Ethan Cross walked at her right side, neither ahead nor behind, his posture upright, his hands visible and calm. The murmur of council voices faded into controlled silence as they reached the platform's center. Above them, the star map brightened. One of the senior counselors rose from his tiered seat, metallic robes reflecting the chamber's light. "The findings are verified," he announced, voice amplified across encrypted channels reaching every allied world. "The royal line shows sustained biological activation." A ripple of subdued reaction moved through the hall, not chaos, but recalibration. Data streams unfolded midair, projecting genetic models visible to every delegate. Ethan recognized the intersecting sequences instantly. The alignment was no longer theoretical. It was measurable, replicable, undeniable. Another counselor stood. "The catalyst," she said, her gaze settling briefly on Ethan, "originates from human biological interaction." The word human echoed across the chamber, transmitted in real time beyond the planet's atmosphere. Ethan felt the weight of distant eyes across light years, but he did not lower his head. Valira stepped forward, her voice steady, resonant without strain. "3 centuries ago, our predecessors altered the royal genome to prevent succession conflict," she said. "They believed dormancy ensured stability." The star map dimmed slightly, focusing attention on her figure alone. "Today, we face evidence that stability was not lost. It was incomplete." Silence followed, not hostile, but attentive. "The activation is not contamination," she continued. "It is compatibility." Ethan felt the subtle vibration beneath her sternum intensify as she spoke, the harmonic pulse registering even on the chamber's ambient sensors. She did not hide it. She allowed it to be seen. A third counselor rose, expression measured. "Compatibility with an external species introduces unpredictability." Valira's golden eyes sharpened. "So does evolution." The words settled over the chamber like a controlled detonation, not destructive, but transformative. Ethan stepped forward then, just one pace, careful not to overshadow her authority. "I did not seek this outcome," he said clearly, voice steady under the dome's amplification. "I acted to preserve life during a system failure. If that action revealed new potential, then the potential was already present." His American accent carried across 17 systems without distortion. "I claim no throne. I claim responsibility." The hall remained silent for 3 full seconds, an eternity in political timing. Then the chief geneticist activated the final display. A stabilized waveform filled the air, steady, synchronized, growing stronger by measurable increments. There was no anomaly, no decay, only progression. The first counselor inclined his head slightly toward Valira. "The activation is viable." The phrase traveled instantly across interstellar networks. Viable. Not fragile. Not forbidden. Viable. Valira extended her hand toward Ethan in full view of every delegate and every broadcast receiver. He met her gesture without hesitation. Their hands touched, not in possession, not in dominance, but in acknowledgement. The harmonic pulse surged gently, lighting the chamber floor beneath them with a faint silver-blue glow. For centuries, the royal line had stood alone at the center of power. Now, under the gaze of 17 systems, it stood aligned with something new. And no one in that chamber could deny what the data had already declared. The chamber did not erupt in applause. It did not fracture into argument. It shifted, slowly, deliberately. The star map above the High Council platform recalibrated its brightness, 17 systems glowing in balanced alignment as the word viable continued transmitting across secure channels. Queen Valera Nix did not withdraw her hand from Commander Ethan Cross immediately. She allowed the contact to remain visible, documented, undeniable. The harmonic pulse beneath her sternum no longer flickered with uncertainty. It moved with steady rhythm, synchronized to a second presence standing beside her. Around the circular tiers, counselors conferred in low voices measured in policy. Not panic. The genetic data remained suspended midair, luminous strands woven together where doctrine had once insisted separation was absolute. Ethan felt the weight of history in the silence. He did not attempt to fill it. He did not step forward again. He simply stood aligned at her side, posture grounded, eyes steady beneath the vast projection of rotating constellations. A senior delegate rose once more, metallic robes catching the chamber light. Under royal authority, the delegate said carefully, "The activation shall be recognized as legitimate and protected." The term protected traveled faster than light through the transmission grid. Not concealed, not denied, protected. Valera inclined her head with controlled acknowledgement. "The future of this empire has never been secured by fear," she said, voice resonant across the dome and beyond the planet's atmosphere. "It has been secured by adaptation." She paused, allowing the statement to settle into every listening world. 3 days ago, a human commander chose to act without permission in order to preserve life. That action did not weaken us. It revealed capacity we believed lost. Ethan felt the subtle tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with gravity. He had not come seeking legacy. He had come seeking survival. Yet here he stood, woven into a future measured in light years. The council chamber floor glowed faintly silver blue beneath their feet, responding to the synchronized waveform still registering at stable levels. No alarms sounded. No instability warnings flashed across the displays. Only progression. Valera released his hand at last, but the separation did not break the alignment. It remained, measured and steady. She turned slightly toward him, her golden eyes holding his without the barrier of ceremony. "Commander Ethan Cross," she said, voice quieter now though still amplified across the hall. "You are recognized under imperial decree as royal protected consort and guardian of the activated line." The title was not conquest. It was responsibility formalized. Ethan drew a slow breath. "Your Majesty," he replied, clear and composed. "I accept the responsibility to protect what has begun." There was no kneeling, no grand gesture, only commitment spoken plainly. Beyond the chamber walls, orbital stations adjusted their transmissions to reflect new succession protocols. Across 17 systems, citizens witnessed not scandal, not dominance, but something rarer. Choice acknowledged publicly. Data accepted over prejudice. Alignment over fear. The star map above dimmed gradually as the session concluded. Delegates rose in synchronized motion, not in resistance, but in recalibrated understanding. Valera stood tall beneath the fading constellations, the faint glow at her chest steady and strong. Ethan remained at her side, no longer a variable to be removed, but a presence integrated into the structure of an empire. Outside the vast dome, Salari Prime continued its rotation through silent space, moons casting silver light across the capital spires. Inside, beneath the last shimmer of the projection, the queen who once laughed at the possibility of human relevance now stood in quiet acknowledgement of a truth written not in tradition, but in heartbeat. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the royal line did not stand alone.